If you're alone and you need a friend, someone to make you forget your problems, just come along, baby, take my hand. I'll be your lover tonight. Oh, this is what I wanna do. Oh, let's have some fun. Oh, one-on-one, just me and you. Oh, boom, 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 boom. I want you in my room. Let's spend the night together from now until forever. Boom, 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 boom. I want a double boom. Let's spend the night together in my room. The connection between the book and the song is getting like more and more tenuous. But like, I tried, okay? And you know what? I'm not going to be able to fit this joke into the video at any other place, so I'm going to do it before the video even starts. The Never King, more like I wish I never read this thing. Get it? Get it? Guys, get it? Hey, what's good? Welcome back to my channel. My name is D, and this is another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. Today, we're going to be talking about The Never King by Nikki St. Crowe. Before we get into all of that, I got to give a quick shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, Laughing Cat Dog and Luba Brock. Thank you so much for your support. You are helping to ensure that I'm able to keep creating this content and put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support the channel and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you get an extra rant review video from me once per month, as well as access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me and a bunch of other really lovely club members. And it's a really good time. We do a book club, and yeah, it's great. So if any of that sounds interesting or exciting to you, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. And if Patreon's not really your thing, no worries. But for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right, now let's get back to The Never King. So this is a dark, erotic, retelling, reimagining sequel to Peter Pan, and it came out in 2022, and it's a dark fantasy reverse harem type deal. If you've never heard of this book before, no worries. I'm gonna read the premise before I get into the review. The stories were all wrong. Hook was never the villain. For 2 centuries, all the darling women have disappeared on their 18th birthday. Sometimes they're gone for only a day, some a week or a month, but they always return. Now, on the afternoon of my 18th birthday, my mother is running around the house making sure all the windows are barred and the doors are locked, but it's pointless. Because when night falls, he comes for me. And this time, the Never King and the Lost Boys aren't willing to let me go. Alright, so let's get into the spoiler-free part of this review, starting with the characters. There's a lot of main characters in this book. I don't like any of them, and most of them aren't interesting or compelling. We do get first-person narration out of, like, 4 out of 5 of the characters, which I think is interesting. And I guess the main character is Winnie Darling, who is a descendant of Wendy Darling. Winnie is an 18-year-old who reads kind of like a 28-year-old, or maybe even like early 30s. Part of that, I assume, is because the character's backstory is like riddled with trauma and suffering. You know, like when you go through a lot of life, you grow up fast. But also, like, you know, creepier reasons too, I think. Winnie isn't your typical thirsty romantasy character with like no personality outside of being thirsty. She uses her sexuality and like sex as more of a tool or even a weapon more than any other character I've ever read. She's calculating and manipulative. I don't know how good at it she is, but she's trying. Again, she's a survivor, she's resourceful. I don't know how smart she's supposed to be. I do think it's kind of weird that she's 18. Like, I really don't like the dynamic of centuries old mythical creature with barely legal woman trope, and especially since like the reasoning that Peter Pan comes for the darling women when they turn 18 is really like it has to do with the brain and memories, and they're like, oh yeah, like we got to get them before they've fully matured and stopped being children, which now that I'm saying that out loud is really giving me the ick. But also, like, brains finish developing at like mid to late 20s, right? So that whole, like, this character could be 25 and the story would be exactly the same. So I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. A lot of the relationships and the dynamics between Winnie and any of the Lost Boys is sort of based around sex. There's no like they say this is a romantasy, but it's not very romantic. Like there's no affection for each other. They just bang. Peter Pan is like the edgiest of edgy shadow boos. You know how like a lot of dudes in these kind of books do the whole like you touch her and you die thing. Like Peter Pan is the only character I've seen make good on that threat, and he ain't ever even make that threat. Pan's like sole motivation is preserving the magic and saving the island of Neverland. He's a violent, impulsive, ruthless leader. That's kind of all there is to him. Bash and Cass are twin brothers, and they're like fae, and that's kind of all there is to them. They're just kind of your typical fae males from books like this. And lastly, Vane, who's the only character we don't get like any narration from. He's you know how I said that Peter Pan's like the edgiest of edgy shadow boos? Vane is even edgier. Moving on to world building, you know, something that I've noticed as I've been doing this channel for almost a year is that a lot of these like fae romantasy books have different realms and magic and all that stuff, but world building isn't really a high priority. It's all about banging humanoid mythical creatures. And I would say that that is true for this book as well. That said, you know, there's some interesting ideas. You feel me? The relationship that Peter Pan has with his shadow is like a reference to Peter Pan. Well, it's not a reference. It's like part of the lore of Peter Pan, the way it's been sort of fae romantasyified. That's not a phrase. You know what I'm trying to say, though. The way it's been sort of tweaked to fit into this sort of modern fantasy is kind of interesting. Apparently there's like 4 or 5 books in this series. I'm not really sure, but maybe that gets explored in later books. But yeah, I will say that like the fae stuff felt really shoehorned into this book. Like the author just knew that fae stuff really sells and is just kind of riding the coattails of SJM's success. Honestly, smart move. And this is at least more like interesting than an SJM book. Not better, but definitely weirder, and thus more interesting. Moving on to plot, you know, there isn't too much to say about it. Like, not a ton happens. It's mostly just Winnie seducing the Lost Boys, and the Lost Boys kind of like taking turns being awful. I will say at the end, like I wouldn't call them twists or anything. You know, I wasn't like taking surprise, like, whoa, what a crazy twist. But the way that it ended, I was like, oh, it's interesting, maybe even cool how like so many Peter Pan elements and references were kind of packed into the end. Because I was like, this is barely Peter Pan, and you did not need, like, this could have just been its own thing. I feel bad, but I don't have much to say about the writing. Like, I don't know. It's almost like flavorless. None of the male characters' voices are very distinct from each other. Feels like there's 4 edgy shadow boos with varying degrees of edginess. And there's like almost too much swearing in this book. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know this author, but I get the impression that they were an edgy theater kid at some point, or maybe wanted to be a theater kid, but the theater kids were like too mean. Because that can happen, you know, like in my high school, the jocks were actually pretty nice, and the band kids and the stoners were the worst. But what I mean is, like, you know, it just feels like there's so much like sex and swearing in this book that it feels like it's for the sake of being edgy. It's for the sake of shock value in a way. And it's like, I don't know. I get the sense that maybe this wasn't written because the author has like a deep love for Peter Pan and wanted to reinvent the story or revitalize the story, but wanted to like write something shocking and sexy and just kind of baked in an IP that already has a fan base or something. I don't know. I don't want to call it like soulless or whatever because that feels really pretentious, but it just doesn't feel like a passion project, you know? All right, so moving on to the spoiler section of this review where I just kind of read through the notes that I took as I was reading this. Chapter 1, Winnie is the daughter of a prostitute and is hooking up with the high school quarterback, and he's bad at sex. Magnificent on the football field. If only I liked football and he liked sex. That's a quote, by the way. Every darling gets kidnapped at 18 by Peter Pan and comes back mad. Winnie doesn't believe it and is afraid of going mad herself. So, we just get right into it. Zing? No, that's not a zing. It's funny, I start the book and I'm just like, oh, it's like that, huh? Okay. And like, this is such a nitpick. I do think it's interesting that all these women, like the descendants of Wendy, keep the last name. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I've like watched or read any story where like the character is a descendant of a character from a well-known story, like the descendant of Wendy Darling or the descendant of Robin Hood. Or, well, I guess Robin Hood doesn't have a last name. But I'm always surprised when the last name like survives hundreds of years. I don't know why. It just like seems, I don't know, it seems weird to me. Anyways, and then I probably should have written this down before we get to chapter 2. But so like she goes home after school or after hanging out with this guy, and her mom is freaking out and is like, he's gonna come for you and there's nothing we can do. And then like, the clock strikes and Peter Pan shows up, and he's not like a little boy. He is like a big muscular dude with tattoos, and he's smoking, and he just kind of walks in and grabs Winnie and leaves. Chapter 2, it's from Peter Pan's perspective. He brings Winnie back and thinks this has got to be the last one. He tells the Lost Boys not to fuck Winnie. We don't fuck the darlings, we break them. That's a quote. And then my note is, so I guess he's got to sacrifice them to bring back the magic. I don't know why I thought that, because like they say they come back, so obviously they're not getting like sacrificed or whatever. But yeah, I was very confused for a little bit there. And I have like nothing to say about this really, because I didn't grow up like being a huge fan of Peter Pan. My wife actually was a big fan of Peter Pan. She liked a couple of the different movies or whatever. And I don't know if I've seen the Disney one. I might have once. I don't know. I know I've seen Pan, where Hugh Jackman plays Blackbeard, and Hook. I don't know if he was good looking, but he was young. Kind of looked like Indiana Jones. Do you remember that movie? Whatever. Chapter 3, Winnie wakes up chained to a bed and thinks about how it's kinky. She meets the two twins who look like boys with the presence of men. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. She debates seducing them because they could have their way with her anyways. And a third Lost Boy shows up and he's scary, and they offer her food. Chapter 4 is from Bash's perspective. They're pretending to be nice to make Winnie feel like more comfortable or whatever, and they make her pancakes. Because it's tradition, they always make the darling pancakes the next morning. Apparently, she looks sexy while she's eating them. I don't get that. Like, I think sometimes in movies, like they'll depict like Cameron Diaz, or maybe I'm showing my age there, but like some movie star will eat like a strawberry or something kind of sexy like. And I never understood that. Like as a kid, I was like, yeah, but like eating's not sexy. No one's like sexy while they eat. I don't know. I don't get that. Especially pancakes. I think pancakes might be one of the least sexy foods. Cheeseburgers, obviously less sexy than pancakes. I don't know. Comment down below. What do you think the least sexy food is? And then, yeah, his cock takes notice. I hate that word so much, and I hate how much it's used in these books. But also, I thought it was funny that several times some character's cock takes notice of Winnie. Yeah, chapter 5, nothing happens. Like, literally nothing. Who cares? Chapter 6, Peter Pan wakes up at night. He can't go out into the sun, and he's missing his shadow. In parentheses, I have very clever. I don't know if it's very clever. I think I might have been being facetious. I don't know. I don't know what I meant by that. Oh, and then my note continues. I guess his magic and his shadow are connected, and without it, he's gonna die. He goes to drink with the Lost Boys, and he and his right-hand man, Vane, take Winnie for a walk to show her that she can't escape, and then she tries to run. Chapter 7 to 8, Winnie runs and is caught by Pan, and she demands to know what he wants, and he explains that the darling stole something from him, and he wants it back. Winnie is taken to her room and chained up, and she remembers a wealthy prostitute she knew who told her that there's nothing more powerful than tits and brains, and she decides that she's going to fuck Cass, the lost boy, to it. And I don't know, maybe that's true. Maybe that's a life lesson. I wouldn't know. I don't really have brains to use as a powerful weapon. So, chapter 9, Cass talks to the Darling and reveals that he and Bash are Fae. And then in parentheses, I have, there it is. Winnie tries to seduce him, but he's like, nah, I know this song, and he leaves. But he is like pretty turned on by the whole thing, so he goes to a bonfire where the other lost boys that are never named and a bunch of girls, it's never explained how they got there, are hanging out, and he has one give him a blowjob in front of everyone, because that's a thing. This is a lot. Chapter 10, Bash goes to Winnie to demand that she explain why Cass is so upset, and then they bang. Pan walks in and watches, and then he pulls her off of him before she can finish. Then Pan tells Bash to leave, and he fingers Winnie. Chapter 12, Winnie wakes up the next day and talks to Cherry, who is obviously the daughter of Captain Hook. She reveals that there are 7 islands and 7 kings, and each island has 2 shadows, one for life and one for death. Pan chose the life shadow, but lost it and is now dying. And that was the part that I said that I thought was kind of interesting or kind of cool, because I just haven't heard something like that yet. So I was like, oh, cool, like something different-ish. Bash and Cass hang out, and Bash admits to fucking Winnie. Cherry asks them to invite Winnie to tonight's bonfire, because they have bonfires every night or whatever. Chapter 14, Brownie. They literally call him Brownie. Fairy of some kind, and he reports to the queen, who is the twins' sister, and she's plotting against Pan, but is also like, Pan's gonna summon me soon so I can read this girl's mind. Chapter 15, we go back to like Pan and fam. Winnie is flirting with all the characters and prepares for the bonfire. They get drunk at the bonfire, and Winnie flirts with an unnamed lost boy. Chapter 16, Pan is woken up by Vane, who tells him about the party. Pan gets up, he goes, and he literally rips out the heart of the unnamed lost boy. And that's pretty metal, Like I said before, a lot of characters are like, you touch her, you die, and then never kill the guy who touches her. Pan doesn't say anything, he just kills the guy who touches her. I respect that. I don't actually, but, is kind of playing with the trope there. So, chapter 17, Winnie is taken away, and she's turned on by the sight of Pan's face covered in blood, and he bangs her to teach her a lesson, and then the twins bang her, and Vane spits in her mouth. Just wanted to give y'all a second and just let that sink in. Chapter 18, nothing happens. Chapter 19, Peter Pan and Vane go and hunt pirates. Chapter 20 to 21, Winnie sleeps with the twins. I think like literally sleeps, like they share a bed now. And they have breakfast together. Cass makes croissants because those are her favorite things, and Bash reveals that they are princes of the Fae. Chapter 22, literally nothing happens. Chapter 23, Winnie seduces Vane, or tries to. He rejects her, and it makes her really mad. Chapter 24, Peter Pan and Winnie talk, and he mentions that he lost his shadow in a coup. Chapters 25 to 27, they get Winnie ready for the memory search. Tilly arrives. Tilly is the sister of Bash and Cass. I think their mom is Tinkerbell. And then my note says, anyways, the memory search hurts, so Vane interrupts it. Chapter 28, Winnie has a dream about where the shadow might be, and Tinkerbell kills Wendy. And Wendy's younger sister, who I didn't know she had, witnesses the killing. So, and that's the whole plan, right? Peter Pan hopes that one of the Darling's descendants has inherited those memories, that Tilly could read the mind, figure out the location of the shadow. But what he doesn't know is that Tilly doesn't search for memories really. She just drives these women insane because Tinkerbell was the one who took the shadow and hid it with Wendy before she killed her. So in chapter 29, they go to the human world and they find the shadow. In chapters 30 until whenever it ends, they go back to the old Victorian, which I guess is the original house, and the brownie is there. And I really don't get why it's called the brownie. Like, is that a racial slur? Is it because some fairies are named after food? I don't know. It was weird. Anyways, so he reveals that he swore an oath to Tinkerbell to like keep the shadow away from Pan because he was a terrible king. He's the worst guy to ever be a guy. They fight, and the Lost Boys kill them all. And then Winnie finds the shadow in a trunk that has a secret compartment. Her mom is like, she and her mom kind of reunite, reconcile for a little bit. Her mom's like, no, if you want to go back, you should go back. And I get it. And you know, I remember liking it there before they broke my brain. So they go back to Neverland. Peter Pan opens up a box and two shadows come out of the box. And so I guess it's both the life and the death shadow of Neverland because, you know, a couple times they say that the death shadow from Neverland was lost. So maybe that's it. I don't really know. I'd probably give it like 2 stars. I'm sure this is great if this is like what you're into or whatever. It's just not for me. The one thing I will say is that like when I started this channel and I read Fourth Wing, I did so kind of ironically. And I kind of ironically, I mean, I did it because I thought it would be funny if I did that. Like anyone who knows me knows that that's not something that I would have picked up, and anybody who just like looks at me, I think like that's the whole point or the whole gag of my channel is that like I look like this, I present this way, and I have these like opinions on like books that are geared towards the literal opposite demographic of me. And that's whatever. The one thing I will say is that if you get into anything ironically, eventually if you stick to the bit long enough, it starts to become a little sincere. And I'm not saying that I sincerely enjoy any of these books. Like I still know that these are not meant for me and these still don't really do it for me because they're just not my thing. But I am starting to like take my analysis. I don't even like calling it analysis because I'm not very analytical. I'm not like, there are times where people give me like hate comments and kind of imply that I'm pretending to be smarter than I think I am. There are times where I get like hate comments where people definitely think that I'm being like pretentious and like fake smart, but I'm like, I never claimed to be smart. The review series is literally called Book Reviews with a Regular Dude, so I don't really get why people come through with these like actually essays and all that type of bullshit. Anyways, yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. Maybe even 1.8 if you're into like dark romantasy type things and you want like a quick, like, I guess you probably read this. You could probably read this. You could probably start this after lunch and be done before dinner. So if you just want to like afternoon with a dark, spicy Peter Pan book, this is probably for you. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. Super duper thank you to my super duper don't fretters, Cassie, Knight Smith, and Oliver. I really appreciate y'all helping me to create this content and put it out as frequently as possible. Everyone else, thank you so much for watching this video. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.